Hello everyone, welcome to Keralium Talk. Today we have a very special guest. She has been an icon of civil society movements in India, and she represents the most oppressed sections of our society. She has been working consistently for more than 30 years for the rights of the most suffering people. And today she came to Kerala to extend her support and solidarity with the people and the movement that's fighting against K-Rail Silver Line project. And I'm very happy to welcome Medha Phadke to our talk today. Welcome, Medhaji. And Medhaji, you have been fighting for the rights, as I said in the introduction, for a long time. Maybe started with Narmada Bachao Andolan for the rights of women, rights of Dalits, tribals and farmers. And today you are in Kerala and you support the fight against K-Rail project or the Silver Line project, which is designed by the Kerala government, and they claim that it's a very ambitious project which they designed for the purpose of very fast transit in the future. So, but you say that it's a destructive project, it's against the interest of the people, and also it's against the interest of the environment, though the government claim it's a green project. So why do you think it's a destructive project?
This is the reality which is brought to me by the people in Kerala. This project is going to affect at least 20,000 families across the small, beautiful, bountiful state of Kerala. And those are the families that include even in some districts which were earlier affected by the highway project as well. Now, in such a kind of situation, when it is always the fact that is neither the project is fully assessed in terms of the environmental or social impacts, nor has the project received sanction from the central authorities, and yet that is considered as a green project. The cost of the project as per the Kerala government is 67,000 crores, but the Niti Aayog has said it is going to be beyond 1 lakh crore. Now, when this investment is going to take place and this project is going to cross the wetlands, it is going through demolition of certain schools, temples, but houses, the shelter, that is a right of the people. Certainly without their consent, this should not be imposed, encroaching upon their rights. And we know that even the other projects in Kerala or elsewhere, wherever displacement has taken place, rehabilitation is not really attained so easily. We had to fight 36 years since we started the Narmada Bachao Andolan, and we continue to do it. But another thing is, when they call it an economy of growth, it cannot be unsustainable economy. That is something that infrastructure we have witnessed bringing in flooding, and every city, even Kerala, is flooding time and again. With this kind of infrastructure, where hundreds of kilometers will have a huge track, not broad gauge, standard gauge.
Right.
So it will not be linked with railway.
Yes.
So the common people will not be able to use it.
No access.
That was the claim earlier, but now it is different.
Yes.
And huge funding will come from JICA, the bilateral agency of Japan. Is this necessary? Is this indispensable? Why save just few minutes or few hours, and for that bringing certain impact, social and environmental, which they cannot compensate easily, is our question. We want the development of railway, which is a profit-making public sector, which is unnecessarily privatized and corporatized. But instead of that, they are concentrating on such high speed and high cost projects, which is not the real priority.
Didi, you can find that this is not something that's exclusively happening in Kerala.
Yes.
You have been working throughout different states in India, and you know that the government or the state claim one thing, and they say that it's for the prospect of the country or the prospect of the people. And at the same time, you can find that there are a large number of people who has to pay for that. And at the same time, you can also find some section of society, they also support what the state or the government say that. So this conflict of interest, it's a long story, never-ending process. So why do you think that the state is waging war against its own people? Why do you think so? What?
You say the state is not necessarily representing the people, and especially the disadvantaged sections of the people. Rather, the politicians are becoming partners with the corporates, and that is witnessed in not one but many states and in many projects. And through that, they gain their funding, which is not having RTI Act applicable, so it is non-transparent, but that is through the donations and gifts given for the electoral politics by these corporates who earn through such projects huge profits. And that's why the profit over people and profit over nature are the principles that are reflected in the development planning today. Instead, if the development planning is decentralized, if the community level development plans are brought together to make a development plan at the district level and then the state level, as was the direction given even by the Planning Commission earlier, and that is based on the Article 243 of the Constitution, then the situation will be changed. And today the perspective or the paradigm of development is of consumerism, not simplicity, not sustainability to save nature. So everyone sees the Western paradigm, the global kind of blooming and glittering kind of symbols of development, which they think should be brought to our country. But imagine what is faced by our agriculturists who were compelled to fight the battle to stop the acts in favor of the corporates and accepting martyrdom of not less than 714 farmers. Imagine what is happening in every sector where such private investors are coming in, local to global, and that is bringing in huge inequity and causing injustice to those who get deprived of even the basic services which the state is duty bound to. So it is necessary to understand that the present culture of politics is changed, the economy is changing, and the blame is to go to the policy and policy makers both.
I remember our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, in 1948, talking to people in Hirakud Dam, said that if you suffer you should suffer for the cause of the community. And I think that he and many national leaders knew that for the development, someone has to pay the cost. But today, the situation is very different. Today, you can find that government is asking the people for sacrifice, but in collision with the corporate interest, there's one side, they sell everything for them. We don't have any public sector, very few public sector left out. Even I think that even Indian Railway is going to be sold out very soon. So in this context, do you think that the state have the right to ask the people to pay for the development, or should they suffer for that?
See, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru did consider the big dams as the temples,
Yes, exactly.
modern temples,
Yeah.
and he referred to Bhakra Nangar
Correct.
project. But same Nehru ji took a very different position after a few years when he was sharing a dais with V.R. Krishna Iyer ji. And this is what Krishna Iyer ji himself told me, but this is also recorded in the memoirs of Nehru. He said that this disease of gigantism must come to an end, because he had visited China and he had seen the small dams and power projects there. China is also changed today, and it also took up the paradigm of big dams as the only solution for water management and water supply. But Three Gorges Dam also has failed, and America, the United States of America, has decommissioned or demolished 1,000 dams on the various rivers, and they declared a moratorium on big dams years ago in 1994. So whatever may be a statement by a political leader at a particular time, today we know that we cannot consider this as sacrifice. We have to consider this as real investment. And that investment of natural resources and human power is something that is indispensable for any development activity, whether it is industrial or agricultural. And we know that when that investment is not considered with the due value of their contribution, which is not just monetary value, but it is the valued contribution which must be respected. But the displaced, are not even referred to by the person like our Prime Minister Modi ji when he shows butterflies and celebrates the completion of the dam, but never really mentions the displaced persons and never cares to see, in spite of the Supreme Court's directives, whether the rehabilitation is really completed or not. And that's why he really makes a false claim in front of the Chief Justice of India and the other justices, as he did on 26th of November. And he says that the movement has really created barriers and the judiciary could not give the proper judgments in a way. In my words, I am putting his view, which was clearly expressed, because they were hesitant to give the truthful judgments. So blaming even the judiciary, but without understanding the fact that it was the struggle by the people that only could get rehabilitation. And even today, the benefits are not coming true of Sardar Sarovar, and costs are 100 times more than the original cost. So it is very clear that although they make these claims that no, it is sacrifice and it is bound to be there, the displaced people and all those who are sensitive citizens will see this with a different perspective, and then only the people have the right to development planning. And if at all they decide that their land, water, forest or minerals are to be contributed, then they will be participant in the planning and they will also get their due benefits out of the same development project.
Yeah, now I remember, even after independence, Gandhian values were discarded, maybe much before that. Even Kumarappa, who wrote Economic Permanence, and he was even a member of Planning Commission, was not at all heard by even Nehru. Actually, Gandhian system, or Gram Swaraj, had a system of, he was trying to develop a system of India which is suitable for Indian culture, Indian villages, Indian agriculture, but it was completely discarded. And what Nehru started was aggressively taken by Congress government, especially the Narasimha Rao-led government embraced the neoliberal policies. And we know that there was a sea change in economic policies in throughout life. It affected everyone's life. Now, do you think that there was any difference of attitude or a different policy from CPM-led government, political parties or left parties? Because we could find that even BJP, when they came to power, they also embraced the same policies. But we are expecting some kind of different stance from the left parties, left parliamentary political parties. But could you see they could work effectively to have a plan of their own, or they had something different from others?
See, certain aspects and certain situations, we find that the rulers behave in a just manner, and in other cases we see whichever party may be in power, they compromise in favor of the financial investors, whether they are the global institutions, the money lending agencies, or even the Indian corporates and the elite sections. And this is related to their vote banks, because in order to retain their vote banks or gain their vote banks, they need lot of investment and inputs in the electoral process. that they receive from these beneficiaries. So every party makes compromises some time or other, but I would say that Congress government was one which at least had a dialogue with the people when they struggled and knocked at their doors. We expect from the left front government also the same. Some left front leaders are really democratic. They are sharing and contributing greatly to the farmers' movements. They agreed with us on change in the Land Acquisition Act and brought in huge mass base on the streets, Parliament Street, to get the Bhumi Adhikar Andolan started, and also finalize the 2013 Act. And Congress brought in so many acts: Hawkers Act, PESA Act, Adivasi Self-Reliance Act, then the Forest Rights Act, Unorganized Sector Workers Act of 2008, then the new Land Acquisition Act of 2013, and so on. Now, all these acts should be properly and fully complied with and implemented.
Right.
Whichever party is in power, we have to fight for that implementation as well. But whenever we had struggled, whether on the issue of land acquisition or eviction of hawkers or eviction of Adivasis, the forest dwellers, there was a dialogue, in-depth and long-term dialogue, and finally we could get some act out of the UPA government.
Okay.
Similarly, left front also had contributed to the the respect and the recognition given to the sharecroppers in the state of Bengal. But there are mistakes made, and today we see that whosoever come to power, they really cannot and do not avoid corporatization. While all of us together as a secular force are fighting against corporatization in agriculture, we see in every state how that is affecting the sectors like education, health, housing, infrastructure, etc., which is bringing in vulgar disparity than equity and fulfillment of basic needs. So I think we can only have a comparative analysis, but ultimately it is the people's politics
Right.
that can make the electoral political leadership bow down and get on to the right kind of priorities and accept the rights and privileges of the needy sections of population, not otherwise.
Yeah, that's what I want to come to the next one. See, we know that NAP is a network of different organizations working for different sections of society, and they have been working for a long time to bring more justice, more fair world, for sustainability of ecological sustainability and everything. But do you think that, and also you know that all these movements emerge when there is an issue. It's all an issue based, and there is a political society. When they're affected with an issue, they come up, and of course the civil society support them, and it become a movement. But my question is, in addition to this work, of course it's very important in a democratic system, but do you think that parallelly we should have a constructive work where it goes beyond these issues, which brings more sustainable world or more fair world, more just world?
Obviously, that is the alternative paradigm. When we say stop it, we have to say take this in or accept this as an alternative, and that is the choice of technologies in every sector. In the education, when we see that the policy is moving towards not giving the right kind of education with the value framework of human rights and constitutional rights to the children, we started our own Jeevan Shalas, and we could give to the Adivasi children from the first learner generation a courage and confidence to contribute to the social causes at the end of their primary and high school education. And many became teachers, many became activists, and others could also gain their own source of livelihood. But even in the sector of health, many organizations have very successfully tried the paramedic work, bringing in the various pathis and combination of the systems and not depending only on the allopathy. And there are alternative ways which are based on the state's responsibility, with not just Ayushman card but free and good quality health service that must be ensured, and for which if there are a few lakh crores rupees budget necessary, then that can come by correct tax system in this country. And we know that the alternatives in water management, for example, the decentralized water management only serves the needy people and fulfill their, satiate their thirst, not otherwise. The big dams as an approach is not just having a very worse impacts on the river valleys and the natural ecosystems, but they divert the water to industries and cities, and that brings in absolutely unjustifiable distribution without justice. Similarly, in power, we have to go for renewable source of power. We could have one small micro hydel project built with Anil Kumar from Kerala,
Yes.
who had
He's my friend.
worked out a project in Pathampara first, and when I saw that, we requested him. Now that project was best possibly run by the tribal youths whom Anil Bhai motivated and trained, but that project got submerged because of the faulty surveys of the authorities and engineers working on the Narmada project. And thereafter we showed a number of sites where the similar projects could be brought in. But when we suggest such alternatives, we have to again fight to compel them to accept our suggestions. We have alternative draft policies made, but many times they do not accept it, and hence we have to have a demonstrative effect. Run the Jeevan Chalas and then the government take into consideration. Run the Anganwadis as it started, and then the ICDS project came into being. Similarly, all the models which are taken up, say in agriculture, we have to have the organic farming. When a few farmers take up organic or natural farming, the others, get attracted to that and try it, and then they say that, oh, it is zero budget agriculture that is benefiting us. But the market is pushing wrong technologies which are energy intensive, which are water intensive, which are disparity oriented, and that is resulting into climate change, that is resulting into economic changes and politics based on the inequity.
Can we put like this? When we think about the 21st century, in the social sector, growing inequality, economic inequality is the most important issue, and climate crisis in the environment sector is the most important issue. So can we say these are the two major issues that we face? And so, as you said, building communities, more sustainable communities, small communities where there is more value for interdependence, there is more cooperation, more sharing, and people have
simple living against consumerism. How changing lifestyles.
Yes.
That is most important. What Greta Thunberg is suggesting is this, that if we have throughout the energy intensive this thing, we cannot stop carbon emission.
Yeah.
Prime Minister may give an assurance at Glasgow, but that is not going to come true unless we stop extracting coal, unless we reduce our dependence on thermal power, unless we switch over to not just renewable sources of energy, but less and less of energy intensive technologies.
Yeah.
Because even if we shift to renewable sources, Shankar Sharma from Karnataka, who is an expert in this, brings out the fact that even production of those equipments and running those renewable source based energy projects will also require a lot of material, and those inputs also will be production bringing in carbon emission.
Yeah.
So basically simple living is necessary, while our petrol pumps, our shops change to malls, our roads change to highways and flyovers, our transport system is no more in favor of public transport but private transport, and our industries are not really based on the least amount of inputs of natural resources but exploiting human and natural resources the most. All this is a wrong path, and if this is growth, then degrowth is the concept that is now being brought up by the young environmentalists who are worried about how will their generation survive if in the same manner we go on, and the glaciers are coming down, the rivers are drying, the landslides are taking place, the drought and flood cycle is coming, and we are facing umpteen numbers of cyclones, and destruction of natural resources is bringing up the viruses which are killing people without getting oxygen, which comes from the real green ventilators.
But unfortunately, our leaders, especially the political leaders and the state, never understand the importance of sustainable living based on degrowth, as you said, and they do not understand how illogical it is to imagine the indefinite growth based on definite natural resources. So they don't understand. Even they understand, they are not able to act on it. So
they are able. They can have and build their own capacity to act on this, but they are not ready.
Yeah.
They are only power mongers, and their power they gain from that vote bank, which they create based on certain hypnotism, mesmerization. Either it is on the basis of caste, religion, fundamentalism, or it is on the basis of development. Now that has become a mantra for the elections in the past and upcoming elections also. And whatever projects they promise to bring benefits to a certain section of population, there is no post facto evaluation. There is no evaluation in terms of what happened to the people who got affected, and what happened to the benefits which were promised, and what happened to the costs which multiplied during the project construction. And hence they are still managing with that, but I think we have to use the experiences during such kind of pandemic to convince the people that this kind of development paradigm is killing employment. The suicides are taking place not only by the agriculturists but also 1,53,000 workers, especially the daily wage earners, have committed suicide. Why? Because their employment was snatched away, and there are no alternative ways to create employment and for employment generation, which can be cotton industries, village industries, small industries, which can be handmade economy. But that is not yet accepted by all the politicians. But there are few within, like few MLAs had taken a position in favor of saving the rivers of Kerala. I think we should catch such political ideologues in each party and then convince them to have a democratic discussion and planning within the party. Rahul Gandhi had said when he held a meeting with us that it is not so easy to convince my party also. So I will have to invite you to have a dialogue with them. Do invite us. We are ready to share. We are not with any particular party, but we don't mind sharing our thoughts, as Ramvilas Paswan had once called me to speak on the land rights to his party members and leaders. I think we should continue with this dialogue with the people's representatives, right from the Panchayati Raj to the parliament level. And we should also struggle to challenge it if they take wrong decisions, which are clearly corrupt decisions, because huge profits gained through wrong projects with wrong priorities and affecting the common people who are innocent and who are absolutely not necessarily ignorant, but kept into ignorance and peripheralized. I think we should awaken the people also and make them stand up for their rights.
You just mentioned about Rahul Gandhi, and we know that we are ruled by an authoritarian regime where they don't entertain dialogue, discussion and debate, and they don't even believe in any democratic institutions or even in opposition party. So then emerges the importance of Congress party. Even though we find lots of issues with what they have been doing all these years, now we feel the importance, how important a party like Congress. But we know that ground level, many of the places they don't have even a presence. So, but recently we know that Kanhaiya Kumar, Jignesh Mevani, they all joined Congress party. So do you think that, how you evaluate the importance of Congress, and do you think that Congress will come out and they will have some space to fight against this authoritarian regime?
I think with the country facing the worst kind of regime, which is putting the country, its resources and our rights on sale, not just sale of the profit-making public sector industries, but all our resources, and emptying the state exchequer and rejecting their own responsibility, which is highlighted by the Constitution. Voters, citizens, a large number, are looking forward to an alternative ruling party at the state level as well as at the central. Now, whether they will really create a vote bank will also be dependent on the alliances amongst these political parties. We would like to appeal to the parties to start with Uttar Pradesh, and at least all the secular parties, not this or that, if they come together with a common minimum program, a draft we have also worked out and we can give them. And if they agree with this kind of change in the paradigm and ideology while taking our economy and polity ahead, then certainly they can have an alliance with one candidate in each constituency supported by all the parties. But it is the political interest that dominates the decision making related to elections. So we don't know how far they will respond to our appeal. But certainly Congress will also have and will have to create space, because that is the party which has contributed the most to the freedom movement of India. It is not Savarkar and others who are considered as their mentors by the Bharatiya Janata Party. And the Congress during its regime, as I said, always had policies right from Panchashil, as was declared by Jawaharlal Nehru, to all the acts which I just mentioned. And whether there were some gaps, inadequacies, mistakes committed, that is with every party. So I think they must really sit together in the present kind of challenging situation and work out the strategy beyond people's movements, appeals and pressures and influences and challenges.
I think now let's discuss something that gives us a lot of hope. Recently we know that the farmers' struggle, after 1 year, they're going back with a big victory. And after the independence, we could find different farmers who have been working in different sections. They come to say one platform and they could fight for their right, and until they found success. So it was really an overwhelming moment for everyone that government finally had to repeal the 3 laws against farmers, and also they had to admit, they had to whatever demands the farmers raised, they had to apologize
for the countrymen,
yes,
not just farmers.
So, and also we could find that it was not just a fight for their rights. It brought a lot of other dimensions. Like you could find that farmers, one section of farmers were fighting on the street, the other section was working in the field, and there was lots of interdependence among different sections of society. And also they were not just fighting for the rights, but beyond what they were demanding. For example, they were rethinking about how the green revolution has brought a lot of issues in the agriculture sector. So now, how you are also very much part of the movement and the struggle. So when you look back now, how do you feel? What do you think about the farmers' movement and what impact it would have brought for the long term?
This movement has certainly made a great impact on the politics of this country. It It is the victory of the people's politics and people's movement, people's power. And that is on the issue of corporatization. And the 3 acts getting repealed and the Prime Minister feeling compelled to apologize before whole of India is not a small gain.
Right.
And also making the states commit to withdrawal of all the false criminal cases filed against us, and also compelling the state governments such as Haryana and Uttar Pradesh to really compensate partly the loss of the martyrs' lives to their families. This is also a victory. But there are certain issues which are not yet finalized. First and foremost is the MSP, the support price. We feel that it should not just be MSP, it should really be MRP, because the maximum retail price is fixed for any product coming out of machine or industry,
Right.
but not for the natural produce.
products.
Now this is absolutely unjust. It is also therefore necessary that although the Modi government has formed a committee, its composition is not yet finalized. Terms of reference are not finalized. So the Sanyukta Kisan Morcha has unanimously decided that we will give them a chance during this session of Parliament, where we also hope that the opposition leaders and the elected representatives will raise the issue in the Parliament.
Okay.
And we also hope that if they do not raise the issue, then the UP voters will not vote for Modi, thinking that, oh, he has apologized, he has shown a big heart,
Yeah.
and he has also repealed the laws. No, there are many ways in which, many conspiracies through which corporatization inside agriculture sector is still being promoted. Recently, they have given land records work not to patwaris and revenue departments, but to the big multinationals who are going to really manipulate the utilization pattern and land use pattern in the country, and that is dangerous. Silos and godowns are already built by the Adanis and similar kind of corporates. So the FCI godown will get slowly and steadily emptied, and the PDS, the rationing system, will surely get affected, in spite of the fact that the Essential Commodities Act amendment is withdrawn. So we have to still be careful, we have to be a watchdog, and our Sanyukta Kisan Morcha has decided that we will review the situation on 15th of January. But Mission UP, Mission Uttarakhand, Mission Punjab will continue, because we cannot keep quiet when all this is happening in the country, and the people and people's movement have now gained respect, but still their priorities and their demands are not yet fully fulfilled. So the movement is not withdrawn. It is a program at the Delhi borders which is suspended, and if they cheat us, they will lose the upcoming elections. There is no doubt about it. We will not permit them to gain their vote banks based on caste and religious fundamentalism.
I have something very important to know from you. The time you started your social activism has changed a lot, and now, especially after neoliberalism, the total lifestyle changed, the culture changed, politics changed, everything changed. And also, especially after the NDA, BJP-led NDA government, the authoritarian government, you can find that whoever raised the voice against, they are all anti-nationals, or they are all Maoist, or they are all anti-development
Terrorists.
and the laws like UAPA is imposed on them. So it's a very difficult world. So it's always something raising a question. Didi, how you manage? What makes your spirit go on? So what's the courage that gives you to fight relentlessly against injustice, even in this tough time?
Face of the needy, exploited, deprived populations, whether they are migrant workers who walk and lose their life on the way, or whether the unemployed mill workers with whom and for whom we fight, or even the farmers who are committing suicides. And on the other hand, the false slogan mongering like Atmanirbhar Bharat and all we are listening, and false promises are not fulfilled. Seeing this and seeing the vulgar disparity between the Ambanis and the Ambarams, Adanis and the Bija Damja and Adivasi in our villages, we cannot keep quiet. I think that kind of commitment comes when you really take it to your heart, the impacts and the sufferings of the people. And I think that comes through your childhood rearing, etc. But when they use this kind of black laws, UAPA Act or otherwise, it is a threat. It is a threat to your life. It is a threat to your work life. Now, if you are not really engaging yourself in social activism with some glamour or for some other vested interest, you cannot get intimidated through these kinds of threats, and you have to face it if they compel you to face. And you have to really rely upon your conscience and your commitment to the goals and vision, your ideology. I think not just me or my colleagues, but many activists are in India who have contributing throughout their life to towards bringing in justice. And I think that is a must, that is a minimum requirement for calling yourself an activist and a secular progressive activist. I think this government is trying its best, but we also have a hope from judiciary. When they give bail, they should not treat Sudha Bharadwaj type of person as a terrorist and put certain strict conditions which would not even allow her to go back to her work area or to her own house. This is too much. But this is what is being brought in by the coward central government. This had never happened in the country. There was UAP Act, there was TADA Act, for which also we had to raise issues.
Right.
It was applied in different states, including Maharashtra and Kerala. But now what they are doing is unimaginable and unprecedented one. So I think this is also a challenge, one of the challenges to be taken up. There is no other alternative.
I can fully understand when you say that. When you take the sufferings of millions of people in your heart, you can't keep silent and you cannot be threatened even by the state. And also it's a fact.
We know we are falling short of the requirements.
Yeah.
There is nothing great that we need to be praised about.
Yeah, it's also a fact that there are so many people to support you. You get widespread support from different quarters of the world. So let me ask you something, that have you ever felt like taking rest for some time and spending like any other ordinary man, just listening to music, let to be with your friends and having some tranquility and peace and at home, something like this?
Once a while you feel like, but it is felt like a luxury that one cannot afford to in the present situation. I really feel I should not be sleeping every night also. If that time also is saved, we can do much more work. And we need to have the young volunteers and youngsters who would take up this ground level work. They need not get engaged and engrossed in only WhatsApp, which is what's up. They must look at what's down and really get themselves risen above their own personal or familial interests, their own careers and their own incomes. And they must give at least part of their life, say 1 or 2 years, to such causes. And that will really bring to us a real cadre, and we can orient them. They can themselves learn a lot, but they will need to work with courage, commitment, and simplicity, and whatever they can contribute with skills and attitudes, they can grow with that to make their contribution more impactful.
Yeah, what is an important thing? Means what we find missing or lacking is values. So I feel that even to organize a small protest in a community is very challenging now. You can't find people because people have their own business. Their life has changed a lot. You are more individual centric or personal centric. You have career to build. So how tough it is for you to bring people together and organize something and also sustain that movement until you achieve something.
See, when there are people who are facing impacts directly, you can easily organize them. It is difficult to really give them prudence and understanding of what is likely to happen. These two situations are different in terms of the easiest ways and means to organize them as a mass base. But I think if you have the skill of relating with people, interacting with people, and conveying to them your sincerity and genuinity, people do get into the movement, into the struggle and other works. Now, that is a challenge before the activists, no doubt about it. There is individualism, there is marketization, there is commodification of everything, including that of human beings, not just natural resources. So you have to really go beyond this and make them really stand up for human rights. It can begin with their own sufferings, and then they can really relate with the others. I think that kind of spirit needs to be brought in, and it does get into their hearts if we have the proper strategies and programs. And those are not tactics. Those have to be the genuine efforts to really convince the people that without this, there is not going to be survival of your own or the humanity at large, or there will be injustice with other human beings which are your brethren. And then on this kind of International Human Rights Day, we have to therefore propagate our perspective, our vision, our ideology, which is to protect human rights which are beyond legal or constitutional rights.
So we are talking about values. So who are watching our program? So what values would you like to share with them? What they should be giving more
all
important?
These values are there in the preamble of our constitution: equity, justice, freedom of expression, freedom of following our own religion, but secularism and also socialism. Now, this value of socialism was added much later in 1976, but now the present government at the center is trying to remove two of these values from the preamble: socialism and secularism. That is unacceptable, and hence we feel that the youngsters must really pay attention to the human values, not just the rights but values which really give us a vision. It is not the vision of Central Vista, demolition of museum, demolition of parliament and so on. It is the vision which will be based on the humanitarian rights and values. I think if we are a human being, we have to behave in a humane way while interacting with the human beings, and also carrying on our work which will ensure that the survival and basic need fulfillment as development will be attained by every human being and every citizen of any country. I think it's very easily understandable if you really come face to face with the sufferings and you have the human heart within.
Thank you very much.
Well,